if your life is not the way you want it to be, it's possible that your goal is not what it should be. And that's a fundamental religious teaching, by the way. I would say that might be the fundamental religious teaching of Buddhism, right? Because the Buddhists teach in some sense that everything is Maya or illusion. And it's a complicated idea, but partly what it means is the way the world manifests itself to you is in large part determined by your aim within the world. And so by switching aim, you can switch whether something is positive or negative. Like, let's say you come home and you find your wife's having an affair. And it's like, man, you're not happy. You're one bitter, twisted, angry person. And, you go down to the bar and you have a few drinks and you thought, God, I really never liked her. And you think, hey, this is the best day of my life. My wife had an affair. It's like, I'm free. I know this is a ridiculous story, but you get my point. It's like you could make a switch like that. And you think, well, isn't it so strange? It's like half an hour ago, I was like bitter and twisted and angry and resentful and anxious and frustrated and disappointed because there was something I wanted and I wasn't getting it. And now all of a sudden I've decided I didn't want that and everything is switched around. And so that's a miracle that can happen. And so in Rule 6, the rule is put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Well, so what's the idea? It's like, well, if the world isn't up to your standards, let's say, first of all, you might ask yourself about that to begin with. It's like, the world isn't up to your standards. Really? That's the world's problem somehow. It's not more likely that it's, given that you're talking about the world here, it's not more likely that there's some chance that it's your problem. And that if you put yourself right, then the world wouldn't appear to be a problem. And I mean, it's a profound question, and I'm not throwing that out cynically or sarcastically. I mean, I've been disenchanted with the world a fair number of times personally. I'm including myself in the list of people who make that error. But, knowing that your emotional reactions are dependent on your aim, and that that's actually technically true, does immediately open up the question, hey, man, if things aren't laying themselves out in front of you, the way that is necessary for you to live a full and engaged life and not be cynical and bitter and twisted and cruel and vengeful and disappointed and all of that, it's just possible that you're not aiming at the right thing. And man, that is a question worth asking. Well, it's the question people do ask. It's like, well, what's the purpose of life? Well, it's the same question. What should I aim at? Those are the same questions. And, if what you're aiming at is producing nothing but unrequited misery for you and everyone else, and it's a downhill bloody spiral into something approximating hell, then there is some possibility that you should think that perhaps your aim is off. So, and I don't want to overplay my hand on that either, too, because I know perfectly well that, if you're suffering, if you're depressed, if you're miserable, it might be a consequence of really bad luck. Like people get sick. And good people get sick, right? Everyone knows that. Good people, they get sick and they die. And so you can't say, well, if you're miserable and sick, it's because there's something, bad about you. Because then that would be the case for everyone, always, whenever they get ill. And you could just blame ill people. It's like, well, it serves you right that you're sick because you're a bad person. It happens a lot, actually, with ill people, and it's an unfortunate thing. So I know there's an element of chance to all this. And I don't want to downplay that. We are dust in the wind, to use a terrible cliche from a 70s rock song. We're blown hither and thither by events that are somewhat beyond our control. But that's still not the point. The point is that to a large degree, you can determine the manner in which the world manifests itself to you by changing your aim. And so then that opens up the entire domain of philosophy. You think, what good is philosophy? And people think that all the time. What good is philosophy? It's like, hey, philosophy is about value. Well, what use is value? Well, value determines your aim. Well, who cares what your aim is? Well, your aim determines the manner in which the world lays itself out to you emotionally. Well, who cares about that? No one says that. The argument stops there because no one, especially no one who's been seriously hurt or seriously depressed, like in pain, no one ever says, oh, well, who cares about that? Because if you can say that about your pain, all that means is you actually haven't been in pain. Because if you're in enough pain, you will not say that, that's for sure. So you need to know what to aim at. So now you aim at something, you've got a goal, and then you see that you're making progress towards the goal. That's a good thing. That makes you happy. It actually, technically, there's a system, dopamine system, neurochemical system. Same system, by the way, that cocaine and methamphetamine and opiates activate, which is why people like to take those drugs. And it tells you that you're moving forward in the manner that you should be according to the dictates of your plan. Doesn't necessarily tell you whether you have a good plan. That's a more complicated problem, because who knows if you have a good plan. But one thing that you could know is that a plan is better than no plan. That's a really useful thing to know, especially if you're kind of drifting. It's like, well, I'm going to find myself. It's like, no, just pick something and move towards it. And as you move towards it, you're going to succeed and fail specifically. And then you're going to learn something about success specifically, and you're going to learn something about failure specifically. And then you can learn what you use to fix your plan. So a stupid plan is way better than no plan. And you're likely to have a stupid plan, or at least to be able to make one. So that's good news for everybody. You can make a stupid plan. And so I would say, make a stupid plan. And then implement it. Not any stupider than it has to be. You know, you could think about it a little bit, but then implement it. And have your successes and failures along the way, and learn from them. And then you can rejig the goal. You can move the target. That's fine. That's part of the game. It doesn't have to be fixed. It's a movable target. And maybe what you're trying to do is to move the target to an ever better place. So you're moving towards a target, and at the same time you're moving the target, right? And you're trying to move the target towards something like an ultimate ideal. You're trying to find out what that ultimate ideal is, and part of the way you figure that out is by moving towards a target and by learning about success and failure along the way, because then you can inform yourself with regards to what might constitute a reasonable aim. And so that's the reason to go out in the world and like make some mistakes, you know? And then you're going to. And so it's okay. It's okay to make the mistakes.